Chapter 20 Hagrid's Tale. Harry sprinted up to the boys' dormitory to fetch the invisibility cloak and the Marauder's map from his trunk. He was so quick that he and Ron were ready to leave at least 5 minutes before Hermione hurried back down from the girls' dormitories, wearing scarf, gloves, and one of her own knobbly elf hats. "Well, it's cold out there," she said defensively as Ron clicked his tongue impatiently. They crept through the portrait hole and covered themselves hastily in the cloak. Ron had grown so much he now needed to crouch to prevent his feet showing. Then, moving slowly and cautiously, they proceeded down the many staircases, pausing at intervals to check the map for signs of Filch or Mrs. Norris. They were lucky. They saw nobody but nearly headless Nick, who was gliding along absent-mindedly, humming something that sounded horribly like "Weasley is our king." They crept across the entrance hall and then out into the silent, snowy grounds. With a great leap of his heart, Harry saw little golden squares of light ahead and smoke coiling up from Hagrid's chimney. They set off at a quick march, the other two jostling and bumping along behind him, and they crunched excitedly through the thickening snow until at last they reached the wooden front door. When Harry raised his fist and knocked 3 times, a dog started barking frantically inside. "Hagrid, it's us!" Harry called through the keyhole.
"Shoulda known," said a gruff voice.
They beamed at one another under the cloak. They could tell that Hagrid's voice was pleased.
"Been home 3 seconds. Out of the way, Fang! Out of the way, you dozy dog!"
The bolt was drawn back. The door creaked open, and Hagrid's head appeared in the gap. Hermione screamed.
"Merlin's beard! Keep it down!"
said Hagrid hastily, staring wildly over their heads.
"Under that cloak, are you? Well, get in, get in!"
"I'm sorry," Hermione gasped as the 3 of them squeezed past Hagrid into the house and pulled the cloak off themselves so he could just see them. "Oh, Hagrid!"
It's nothing,
said Hagrid hastily, shutting the door behind them and hurrying to close all the curtains. But Hermione continued to gaze up at him in horror. Hagrid's hair was matted with congealed blood, and his left eye had been reduced to a puffy slit amid a mass of purple and black bruises. There were many cuts on his face and hands, some of them still bleeding, and he was moving gingerly, which made Harry suspect broken ribs. It was obvious that he had only just got home. A thick black traveling cloak lay over the back of a chair, and a haversack large enough to carry several small children leaned against the wall inside the door. Hagrid himself, twice the size of a normal man and 3 times as broad, was now limping over to the fire and placing a copper kettle over it. "What happened to you?" Harry demanded while Fang danced around them all, trying to lick their faces.
"I told you, nothing," said
Hagrid firmly.
"Want a cuppa?"
"Come off it," said Ron. "You're in a right state."
"I'm telling you I'm fine," said
Hagrid, straightening up and turning to beam at them all, but wincing.
"Blimey, it's good to see you 3 again. Had good summers, did you?"
"Hagrid, you've been attacked," said Ron.
"For the last time, it's nothing," said
Hagrid firmly. "Would you say it's nothing if one of us turned up with a pound of mince instead of a face?" Ron demanded. "You ought to go see Madame Pomfrey, Hagrid," said Hermione anxiously. "Some of those cuts look nasty."
"I'm dealing with it all right,"
said Hagrid repressively. He walked across to the enormous wooden table that stood in the middle of his cabin and twitched aside a tea towel that had been lying on it. Underneath was a raw, bloody, green-tinged steak, slightly larger than the average car tire. "Oh, you're not going to eat that, are you, Hagrid?" said Ron, leaning in for a closer look. "It looks poisonous."
"It's supposed to look like that. It's dragon meat," Hagrid said, "and I didn't get it to eat it."
He picked up the steak and slapped it over the left side of his face. Greenish blood trickled down into his beard as he gave a soft moan of satisfaction.
"Ah, that's better. It helps with the stinging, you know."
"So are you going to tell us what's happened to you?" Harry asked.
"Can't, Harry. Top secret. More'n me job's worth to tell you that."
"Did giants beat you up, Hagrid?" asked Hermione quietly. Hagrid's fingers slipped on the dragon steak, and it slid squelchily onto his chest.
"Giants?" said Hagrid, catching the steak before it reached his belt and slapping it back over his face. "Who said anything about giants? Who you been talking to? Who's told you Who said I've been...
"We guessed," said Hermione apologetically.
"Oh, you did you?"
said Hagrid, fisting her sternly with the eye that was not hidden by the steak. "It was kind of obvious," said Ron. Harry nodded. Hagrid glared at them, then snorted, threw the steak onto the table again, and strode back to the kettle, which was now whistling.
"Never known kids like you 3 for knowing more'n you oughta," he
he muttered, splashing boiling water into the three of his bucket-shaped mugs. "And I'm not complimenting you neither. Nosy, some would call it. Interfering." But his beard twitched. "So you have been to look for giants," said Harry, grinning as he sat down at the table. Hagrid set tea in front of each of them, sat down, picked up his steak again, and slapped it back over his face. "Yeah, all right," he grunted. "I have." "And you found them?" said Hermione in a hushed voice. "Well, they're not that difficult to find, to be honest," said Hagrid. "Pretty big, see?" "Where are they?" said Ron. "Mountains," said Hagrid unhelpfully. "So why don't muggles—" "They do," said Hagrid darkly. "Only their deaths are always put up down to mountaineering accidents, aren't they?" He adjusted the steak a little so that it covered the worst of the bruising. "Come on, Hagrid, tell us what you've been up to," said Ron. "Tell us about being attacked by the giants, and Harry can tell you about being attacked by the Dementors." Hagrid choked in his mug and dropped his steak at the same time. A large quantity of spit, tea, and dragon blood was sprayed over the table as Hagrid coughed and spluttered, and the steak slid with a soft splat onto the floor. "What do you mean, attacked? Attacked by Dementors?" growled Hagrid. "Didn't you know?" Hermione asked him, wide-eyed. "I don't know anything that's been happening since I left. I was on a secret mission, wasn't I? Didn't want owls following me all over the place. Bloody Dementors! You're not serious." "Yeah, I am. They turned up in a little whinging and attacked my cousin and me, and then the Ministry of Magic expelled me." "What?" "And I had to go to a hearing and everything, but tell us about the giants first." "You were expelled?" "Tell us about your summer, and I'll tell you about mine." Hagrid glared at him through his one open eye. Harry looked right back, an expression of innocent determination on his face. "Oh, all right," Hagrid said in a resigned voice. He bent down and tugged the dragon steak out of Fang's mouth. "Oh, Hagrid, don't! It's not hygiene," Hermione began, but Hagrid had already slapped the meat back over his swollen eye. He took another fortifying gulp of tea, and then said, "Well, we set off right after term ended." "Madame Maxime went with you, then?" Hermione interjected. "Yeah, that's right," said Hagrid, and a softened expression appeared on the few inches of face that were not obscured by beard or green steak. "Well, it's just the pair of us. And I'll tell you this, she's not afraid of roughing it, Olymp. You know, she's a fine, well-dressed woman, and knowing where we was going, I wondered how she'd feel about clambering over boulders and sleeping in caves and that, but she never complained once." "You knew where you were going?" Harry asked. "You knew where the giants were?" "Well, Dumbledore knew, and he told us," said Hagrid. "Are they hidden?" asked Ron. "Is it a secret where they are?" "Not really," said Hagrid, shaking his shaggy head. "It's just that most wizards aren't bothered with where they are so long as it's a good long way away. But where they are is very difficult to get to, for humans anyway, so we needed Dumbledore's instructions. Took us about a month to get there." "A month?" said Ron, as though he had never heard of a journey lasting such a ridiculously long time. "But why couldn't you just grab a portkey or something?" There was an odd expression in Hagrid's unobscured eye as he squinted at Ron. It was almost pitying. "We're being watched, Ron," he said gruffly. "What do you mean?" "You don't understand," said Hagrid. "The Ministry's keeping an eye on Dumbledore and anyone they reckon's in league with him, and—" "We know about that," said Harry quickly, keen to hear the rest of Hagrid's story. "We know about the Ministry watching Dumbledore." "So you couldn't use magic to get there?" asked Ron, looking thunderstruck. You had to act like muggles all the way?" "Well, not exactly all the way," said Hagrid cagily. "We just had to be careful, 'cause Olymp and me, we stick out a bit." Ron made a stifled noise somewhere between a snort and a sniff and hastily took a gulp of tea. "So we're not hard to follow. We was pretending we was going on holiday together, so we got into France and we made like we was heading for where Olymp's school is, 'cause we knew we was being tailed by someone from the Ministry. We had to go slow, 'cause I'm not really supposed to use magic, and we knew the Ministry'd be looking for a reason to turn us in. But we managed to give her the Burke tailing us the slip around Dijon." "Ooh, Dijon?" said Hermione excitedly. "I've been there on holiday. Did you see—" She fell silent at the look on Ron's face. "Well, we chanced a bit of magic after that, and it wasn't a bad journey. Ran into a couple of mad trolls on the Polish border, and I had a slight disagreement with a vampire in a pub in Minsk, but apart from that, couldn't have been smoother. And when we reached the place, and we started trekking up through the mountains looking for signs of them, we had to lay off the magic once we got near them, partly because they don't like wizards, and we didn't want to put their backs up too soon, and partly because Dumbledore had warned us,
You know who was bound to be after the giants and all. Said it was odds he'd sent a messenger off to them already. Told us to be very careful of drawing attention to ourselves as we got nearer in case there was a Death Eater around.
Hagrid paused for a long draught of tea.
Go on, said Harry urgently.
Found 'em,
said Hagrid baldly.
Went over a ridge one night, and there they was, spread out underneath us. Little fires burning below, and huge shadows. It was like watching bits of the mountain moving.
How big are they? Asked Ron in a hushed voice.
About 20 feet, said Hagrid casually. Some of the bigger ones might have been 25.
And how many were there? Asked Harry.
I reckon about 70 or 80, said Hagrid.
Is that all? Said Hermione.
Yep,
said Hagrid sadly.
80 left, and there was loads once. Must have been 100 different tribes all over the world. But they've been dying out for ages. Wizards killed a few, of course, but mostly they killed each other, and now they're dying out faster than ever. They're not made to live bunched up together like that. Dumbledore says it's our fault. It was the wizards who forced them to go and made them live a good long way from us, and they had no choice but to stick together for their own protection.
So, said Harry, you saw them and then what?
Well, we waited till morning. Didn't want to go sneaking up on them in the dark for our own safety, said Hagrid. About 3 in the morning they fell asleep just where they was sitting. We didn't dare sleep. For one thing, we wanted to make sure none of them woke up and came up where we were. And for another, the snoring was unbelievable. Caused an avalanche near morning. Anyway, once it was light, we went down to see 'em.
Just like that? Said Ron, looking awestruck. You just walked right into a giant camp?
Well, Dumbledore told us how to do it, said Hagrid. Give the Gurg gifts. Show some respect, you know.
Give the what gifts? Asked Harry.
Oh, the Gurg means the chief.
How could you tell which one was the Gurg? Asked Ron.
Hagrid grunted in amusement.
No problem, he said. He was the biggest and ugliest and the laziest, sitting there waiting to be brought food by the others, dead goats and such like. Name a carcass. I'd put him at 22, 23 feet and the weight of a couple of bull elephants, skin like rhino hide and all.
And you just walked up to him? Said Hermione breathlessly.
Well, down to him, where he was lying in the valley. They was in this dip between 4 pretty high mountains, see, beside a mountain lake, and Carcass was lying by the lake, roaring at the others to feed him and his wife. Olymp and I went down the mountainside.
But didn't they try and kill you when they saw you? Asked Ron incredulously.
It was definitely on some of their minds, said Hagrid, shrugging. But we did what Dumbledore told us to do, which was to hold our gift up high and keep our eyes on the Gurg and ignore the others. So that's what we did. And the rest of them went quiet and watched us pass, and we got right up to Carcass's feet, and we bowed, and we put our present down in front of him.
What do you give a giant? Asked Ron eagerly. Food?
Nah, he can get food all right for himself, said Hagrid. We took him magic. Giants like magic, just don't like us using it against them. Anyway, that first day, we gave him a branch of Gobrathian fire.
Hermione said, wow, softly, but Harry and Ron both frowned in puzzlement. A branch of everlasting fire, said Hermione irritably. You ought to know that by now. Professor Flitwick's mentioned it at least twice in class.
Well, anyway, said Hagrid quickly, intervening before Ron could answer back. Dumbledore bewitched this branch to burn evermore, which isn't something any wizard could do. And so I lies it down on the snow by Carcass's feet and says, A gift to the Gurg of the Giants from Albus Dumbledore, who sends his respectful greetings.
And what did the carcass say? Asked Harry eagerly.
Nothing, said Hagrid. Didn't speak English.
You're kidding.
Didn't matter, said Hagrid imperturbably. Dumbledore had warned us that might happen. Carcass knew enough to yell for a couple of giants who knew our lingo, and they translated for us.
And did he like the present? Asked Ron.
Oh, yeah. It went down a storm once they understood what it was, said Hagrid, turning his dragon stake over to press the cooler side to his swollen eye. Very pleased. So then I said, Albus Dumbledore asks the Gurg to speak with his messenger when he returns tomorrow with another gift.
Why couldn't you speak to them that day? Asked Hermione.
Dumbledore wanted us to take it very slow, said Hagrid. Let him see we keep our promises. We'll come back tomorrow with another present. And then we do come back with another present. Gives a good impression, see? And gives them time to test out the first present and find out if it's a good one, and get them eager for more. In any case, giants like Carcass overload them with information and they'll kill you just to simplify things. So we bowed out of the way and went off and found ourselves a nice little cave to spend the night in. And the following morning, we went back, and this time we found Carcass sitting up waiting for us, looking all eager.
And you talked to him?
Oh, yeah. First, we presented him with a nice battle helmet, goblin made and indestructible, you know. And then we sat down and we talked.
What did he say?
Not much, said Hagrid. Listen, mostly. But there were good signs. He'd heard of Dumbledore. Heard he'd argued against the killing of the last giants in Britain. Carcass seemed to be quite interested in what Dumbledore had to say. And a few of the others, especially the ones who had some English, they gathered round and listened too. We were hopeful when we left that day. Promised to come back the next day with another present. But that night it all went wrong.
What do you mean? Said Ron quickly.
Well, like I say, they're not meant to live together, giants, said Hagrid sadly. Not in big groups like that. They can't help themselves. They half kill each other every few weeks. The men fight each other and the women fight each other. The remnants of the old tribes fight each other, and that's even without squabbles over food and the best fires and sleeping spots. You'd think, seeing as how their whole race is about finished, they lay off each other, but...
Hagrid sighed deeply.
That night, a fight broke out. We saw it from the mouth of our cave, looking down on the valley. Went on for hours. You wouldn't believe the noise. And when the sun came up, the snow was scarlet, and his head was lying at the bottom of the lake.
Whose head? Gasped Hermione.
Carcass's, said Hagrid heavily. There was a new Gurg, Golgamath. He sighed deeply. Well, we hadn't bargained on a new Gurg 2 days after we'd made friendly contact with the first one, and we had a funny feeling Golgamath wouldn't be so keen to listen to us, but we had to try.
You went to speak to him? Asked Ron incredulously. After you'd watched him rip off another giant's head?
Course we did, said Hagrid. We hadn't gone all that way to give up after 2 days. We went down with the next present we'd meant to give to Carcass. I knew it was a no-go before I'd opened me mouth. He was sitting there, wearing Carcass's helmet, leering at us as we got nearer. He's massive, one of the biggest ones there. Black hair and matching teeth and a necklace of bones. Human-looking bones, some of them. Well, I gave it a go, held out a great roll of dragon skin and said, "A gift for the Gurg of the Giants." Next thing I knew, I was hanging upside down in the air by my feet. 2 of his mates had grabbed me.
Hermione clapped her hands to her mouth. How did you get out of that? Asked Harry.
Wouldn't have done if a limp hadn't been there, said Hagrid. She pulled out her wand and did some of the fastest spell work I've ever seen. Running marvellous. Hit the 2 holding me right in the eyes with conjunctivitis curses, and they dropped me straight away. But we were in trouble then, because we'd used magic against them, and that's what giants hate about wizards. We had to leg it, and we knew there was no way we was going to be able to march into camp again.
Blimey, Hagrid, said Ron quietly. So how come it's taking you so long to get home if you were only there for 3 days? Asked Hermione.
We didn't leave after 3 days, said Hagrid, looking outraged. Dumbledore was relying on us.
But you just said there was no way you could go back.
Not by daylight, we couldn't know. We just had to rethink a bit. Spent a couple of days lying low up in a cave and watching. And what we saw wasn't good.
Did he rip off more heads? Asked Hermione, sounding squeamish.
No, said Hagrid. I wish he had.
What do you mean?
I mean, soon found out that Golgamath didn't object to all wizards. Just us.
Death Eaters? Said Harry quickly.
Yup, said Hagrid darkly. Couple of them were visiting him every day, bringing gifts to the Gurg, and he wasn't dangling them upside down.
How do you know they were Death Eaters? Said Ron.
Because I recognized one of them, Hagrid growled. McNair. Remember him? Bloke they sent to kill Buckbeak? Maniac he is. Likes killing as much as Golgamath. No wonder they were getting on so well.
So McNair persuaded the giants to join you-know-who? Said Hermione desperately.
Hold your hippogriffs, I haven't finished me story yet, said Hagrid indignantly,
who, considering he had not wanted to tell them anything in the first place, now seemed to be rather enjoying himself.
Me and Olimp talked it over, and we agreed, just 'cause the Gurg looked like favouring you-know-who, didn't mean all of them would. We had to try and persuade some of the others, the ones who hadn't wanted Golgamath as Gurg.
How could you tell which ones they were? Asked Ron.
Well, they were the ones being beaten to a pulp, weren't they? Said Hagrid patiently. The ones with any sense were keeping out of Golgamath's way, hiding out in caves round the gully just like we were. So we decided to go poking around the caves by night and see if we couldn't persuade a few of them.
You went poking around dark caves looking for giants? said Ron with odd respect in his voice.
Well, it wasn't the giants who worried us most, said Hagrid. We were more concerned about the Death Eaters. Dumbledore had told us before we went not to tangle if we could avoid it, and the trouble was they knew we was around. Spectre Golgamath told them about us. At night, when the giants were sleeping and we wanted to be creeping into the caves, McNair and the others were sneaking around the mountains looking for us. It was hard to stop a limp jumping out at them, said Hagrid, the corners of his mouth lifting his wild beard. She was raring to attack 'em. She's something when she's roused, a limp. Fiery, you know. Expect it's the French in her.
Hagrid gazed misty-eyed into the fire. Harry allowed him 30 seconds reminiscence before clearing his throat loudly. So what happened? Did you ever get near any of the other giants?
What? Oh, yeah, we did. Yeah, on the third night after Carcass was killed, we crept out of the cave we'd been hiding in and headed back down into the gully, keeping our eyes skinned for the Death Eaters. Got inside a few of the caves. No go. Then, in about the 6th one, we found 3 giants hiding.
Cave must have been cramped, said Ron.
Wasn't room to swing a needle, said Hagrid.
Didn't they attack you when they saw you? Asked Hermione.
Probably would have done if they'd been in any condition, said Hagrid, but they was badly hurt, all 3 of them. Golgamath's lot had beaten them unconscious. They'd woken up and crawled into the nearest shelter they could find. Anyway, one of them had a bit of English, and he translated for the others. And what we had to say didn't seem to go down too badly, so we kept going back, visiting the wounded. I reckon we had about 6 or 7 of them convinced at one point.
6 or 7, said Ron eagerly. Well, that's not bad. Are they going to come over here and start fighting you-know-who with us? But Hermione said, What do you mean at one point, Hagrid? Hagrid looked at her sadly.
Golgamath's lot raided the caves. The ones that survived didn't want no more to do with us after that.
So there aren't any giants coming, said Ron, looking disappointed.
Nope,
said Hagrid, heaving a deep sigh as he turned over his steak again and applied the cooler side to his face.
But we did what we meant to do. We gave them Dumbledore's message, and some of them heard it, and I expect some of them will remember it. Just maybe them that don't want to stay around Golgamath will move out of the mountains, and there's got to be a chance they'll remember Dumbledore's friendly to them. Could be they'll come.
Snow was filling up the window now. Harry became aware that the knees of his robes were soaked through. Fang was drooling with his head in Harry's lap. Hagrid, said Hermione quietly after a while. Was there any sign of... Did you hear anything about your mother while you were there? Hagrid's unobscured eye rested upon her, and Hermione looked rather scared. I'm sorry, I forget it.
Dead,
Hagrid grunted.
Died years ago, they told me.
Oh, I'm really sorry, said Hermione in a very small voice. Hagrid shrugged his massive shoulders.
No need, he said shortly. Can't remember her much. Wasn't a great mother.
They were silent again. Hermione glanced nervously at Harry and Ron, plainly wanting them to speak. But you still haven't explained how you got in this state, Hagrid, Ron said, gesturing toward Hagrid's blood-stained face. Or why you're back so late, said Harry. Sirius says Madame Maxime got back ages ago. Who attacked you? Said Ron.
I haven't been attacked, said Hagrid empathetically.
But the rest of his words were drowned in a sudden outbreak of rapping on the door. Hermione gasped. Her mug slipped through her fingers and smashed on the floor. Fang yelped. All 4 of them stared at the window beside the doorway. The shadow of somebody small and squat rippled across the thin curtain.
It's her,
Ron whispered.
Get her here,
Harry said quickly, seizing the invisibility cloak. He whirled it over himself and Hermione, while Ron tore around the table and dived beneath the cloak as well. Huddled together, they backed away into a corner. Fang was barking madly at the door. Hagrid looked thoroughly confused.
Hagrid, hide our mugs!
Hagrid seized Harry's and Ron's mugs and shoved them under the cushion in Fang's basket. Fang was now leaping up at the door. Hagrid pushed him out of the way with his foot and pulled it open. Professor Umbridge was standing in the doorway, wearing her green tweed cloak and a matching hat with ear flaps. Lips pursed, she leaned back so as to see Hagrid's face. She barely reached his navel. So, she said slowly and loudly, as though speaking to somebody deaf, you're Hagrid, are you? Without waiting for an answer, she strolled into the room, her bulging eyes rolling in every direction. Get away, she snapped, waving her handbag at Fang, who had bounded up to her and was attempting to lick her face.
Oh, I don't want to be rude, said Hagrid, staring at her, but who the ruddy hell are you?
My name is Dolores Umbridge. Her eyes were sweeping the cabin. Twice they stared directly into the corner where Harry stood, sandwiched between Ron and Hermione.
Dolores Umbridge, Hagrid said, sounding thoroughly confused. I thought you were one of the ministry. Don't you work for Fudge?
I was senior undersecretary to the minister, yes, said Umbridge, now pacing around the cabin, taking in every tiny detail within, from the haversack against the wall to the abandoned traveling cloak. I am now the defense against the dark arts teacher.
That's brave of you, said Hagrid. There's not many who'd take that job anymore.
And Hogwarts High Inquisitor, said Umbridge, giving no sign that she had heard him.
What's that?
Said Hagrid, frowning. Precisely what I was going to ask, said Umbridge, pointing at the broken shards of china on the floor that had been Hermione's mug.
Oh,
said Hagrid, with a most unhelpful glance toward the corner where Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood hidden.
Oh, that was Fang. He broke a mug, so I had to use this one instead.
Hagrid pointed to the mug from which he had been drinking, one hand still clamped over the dragon's stake pressed to his eye. Umbridge stood facing him now, taking in every detail of his appearance instead of the cabin's. I heard voices, she said quietly.
I was talking to Fang, said Hagrid stoutly.
And he was talking back to you?
Well, in a manner of speaking, said Hagrid, looking uncomfortable. I suppose sometimes Fang's near enough human.
There are 3 sets of footprints in the snow leading from the castle doors to your cabin, said Umbridge sleekly. Hermione gasped. Harry clapped a hand over her mouth. Luckily, Fang was sniffing so loudly around the hem of Professor Umbridge's robes that she did not appear to have heard.
Well, I only just got back, said Hagrid, waving an enormous hand at the haversack. Maybe someone came to call earlier and I missed him.
There are no footsteps leading away from your cabin door.
Well, I don't know why that'd be, said Hagrid, tugging nervously at his beard and again glancing toward the corner where Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood, as though asking for help. Umbridge wheeled around and strode the length of the cabin, looking around carefully. She bent and peered under the bed. She opened Hagrid's cupboards. She passed within 2 inches of where Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood, pressed against the wall. Harry actually pulled in his stomach as she walked by. After looking carefully inside the enormous cauldron Hagrid used for cooking, she wheeled around again and said, What has happened to you? How did you sustain those injuries? Hagrid hastily removed the dragon stake from his face, which in Harry's opinion was a mistake, because the black and purple bruising all around his eye was now clearly visible, not to mention the large amount of fresh and congealed blood on his face. Oh, I had a bit of an accident, he said lamely.
What sort of accident?
I tripped.
You tripped, she repeated coolly.
Yeah, that's right. Over a friend's broomstick. I don't fly myself. Well, look at the size of me. I don't reckon there's a broomstick that'd hold me. A friend of mine breeds Abraxan horses. I don't know if you've ever seen a big beast swinged, you know. I've had a bit of a ride on one of them, and it was...
Where have you been? Said Umbridge, cutting coolly through Hagrid's babbling.
Where have I...
Been, yes, she said. Term started more than 2 months ago. Another teacher has had to cover your classes. None of your colleagues has been able to give me any information as to your whereabouts. You left no address. Where have you been? There was a pause in which Hagrid stared at her with his newly uncovered eye. Harry could almost hear his brain working furiously.
I've been away from my health, he said.
For your health, said Umbridge. Her eyes travelled over Hagrid's discoloured and swollen face, dragon blood dripping gently onto his waistcoat in the silence. I see.
Yeah, said Hagrid. Bit of fresh air, you know.
Yes. As gamekeeper, fresh air must be so difficult to come by, said Umbridge sweetly. The small patch of Hagrid's face that was not black or purple flushed.
Well, change of scene, you know.
Mountain scenery? Said Umbridge swiftly. She knows, Harry thought desperately.
Mountains?
Hagrid repeated, clearly thinking fast.
No, south of France for me. Bit of sun and sea.
Really? Said Umbridge. You don't have much of a tan.
Yeah, well, sensitive skin, said Hagrid, attempting an ingratiating smile. Harry noticed that 2 of his teeth had been knocked out. Umbridge looked at him coldly. His smile faltered. Then she hoisted her handbag a little higher into the crook of her arm and said, I shall, of course, be informing the minister of your late return. Right,
said Hagrid, nodding. You ought to know, too, that as High Inquisitor, it is my unfortunate but necessary duty to inspect my fellow teachers, so I dare say we shall meet again soon enough. She turned sharply and marched back to the door.
You're inspecting us?
Hagrid echoed blankly, looking after her. Oh, yes, said Umbridge softly, looking back at him with her hand on the door handle. The Ministry is determined to weed out unsatisfactory teachers, Hagrid. Good night. She left, closing the door behind her with a snap. Harry made to pull off the invisibility cloak, but Hermione seized his wrist. Not yet, she breathed in his ear. She might not be gone yet. Hagrid seemed to be thinking the same way. He stumped across the room and pulled back the curtain an inch or so.
She's going back to the castle, he said in a low voice. Blimey. Inspecting people, is she?
Yeah, said Harry, pulling off the cloak. Trelawney's on probation already. What sort of things are you planning to do with us in class, Hagrid? Asked Hermione.
Oh, don't you worry about that. I've got a load of great lessons planned, said Hagrid enthusiastically, scooping up his dragon steak from the table and slapping it over his eye again. I've been keeping a couple of creatures saved for your owl year. You wait. There's something really special.
Special in what way? Asked Hermione tentatively.
I'm not saying, said Hagrid happily. I don't want to spoil the surprise.
Look, Hagrid, said Hermione urgently, dropping all pretense. Professor Umbridge won't be at all happy if you bring anything to class that's too dangerous.
Dangerous? Said Hagrid, looking genuinely bemused. Don't be silly. I wouldn't give you anything dangerous. I mean, all right, they can look after themselves.
Hagrid, you've got to pass Umbridge's inspection, and to do that, it would really be better if she saw you teaching us how to look after Porlocks, how to tell the difference between gnarls and hedgehogs, stuff like that, said Hermione earnestly.
But that's not very interesting, Hermione, said Hagrid. The stuff I've got's much more impressive. I've been bringing them on for years. I reckon I've got the only domestic herd in Britain.
Hagrid, please, said Hermione, a note of real desperation in her voice. Umbridge is looking for any excuse to get rid of teachers she thinks are too close to Dumbledore. Please, Hagrid, teach us something dull that's bound to come up in our owl. But Hagrid merely yawned widely and cast a one-eyed look of longing toward the vast bed in the corner.
Listen, it's been a long day and it's late, he said, patting Hermione gently on the shoulder so that her knees gave way and hit the floor with a thud. Oh, sorry. He pulled her back up by the neck of her robes. Look, don't you go worrying about me. I promise you, I've got really good stuff planned for lessons now I'm back. Now you lot better get up to the castle, and don't forget to wipe your footprints out behind you.
I don't know if you got through to him, said Ron a short while later, when, having checked that the coast was clear, they walked back up to the castle. Through the thickening snow, leaving no trace behind them due to the obliteration charm Hermione was performing as they went. Then I'll go back again tomorrow, said Hermione determinedly. I'll plan his lessons for him if I have to. I don't care if she throws out Trelawney, but she's not taking Hagrid. Chapter 21. The Eye of the Snake. Hermione plowed her way back to Hagrid's cabin through 2 feet of snow on Sunday morning. Harry and Ron wanted to go with her, but their mountain of homework had reached an alarming height again, so they grudgingly remained in the common room, trying to ignore the gleeful shouts drifting up from the grounds outside, where students were enjoying themselves, skating on the frozen lake, tobogganing, and worst of all, bewitching snowballs to zoom up to Gryffindor Tower and rap hard on the windows.
Oi!
Bellowed Ron, finally losing his patience and sticking his head out of the window. I'm a prefect, and if one more snowball hits this window... Ouch! He withdrew his head sharply, his face covered in snow. It's Fred and George, he said bitterly, slamming the window behind him. Gits. Hermione returned from Hagrid's just before lunch, shivering slightly, her robes damp to the knees. So, said Ron, looking up when she entered, got all his lessons planned for him? Well, I tried, she said dully, sinking into a chair beside Harry. She pulled out her wand and gave it a complicated little wave so that hot air streamed out of the tip. She then pointed this at her robes, which began to steam as they dried out. He wasn't even there when I arrived. I was knocking for at least half an hour, and then he came stumping out of the forest. Harry groaned. The Forbidden Forest was teeming with the kind of creatures most likely to get Hagrid the sack. What's he keeping in there? Did he say? Asked Harry. No, said Hermione miserably. He says he wants them to be a surprise. I tried to explain about Umbridge, but he just doesn't get it. He kept saying nobody in their right mind would rather study gnarls than chimeras. Oh, I don't think he's got a chimera, she added at the appalled look on Harry and Ron's faces. But that's not for lack of trying from what he said about how hard it is to get eggs. I don't know how many times I told him he'd be better off following Grubbly Plank's plan. I honestly don't think he listened to half of what I said. He's in a bit of a funny mood, you know. He still won't say how he got all those injuries. Hagrid's reappearance at the staff table at breakfast next day was not greeted by enthusiasm from all students. Some, like Fred, George, and Lee, roared with delight and sprinted up the aisle between the Gryffindor and Hufflepuff tables to wring Hagrid's enormous hand. Others, like Pravati and Lavender, exchanged gloomy looks and shook their heads. Harry knew that many of them preferred Professor Grubbly Plank's lessons, and the worst of it was that a very small, unbiased part of him knew that they had good reason. Grubbly Plank's idea of an interesting class was not one where there was a risk that somebody might have their head ripped off. It was with a certain amount of apprehension that Harry, Ron, and Hermione headed down to Hagrid's on Tuesday, heavily muffled against the cold. Harry was worried not only about what Hagrid might have decided to teach them, but also about how the rest of the class, particularly Malfoy and his cronies, would behave if Umbridge was watching them. However, the High Inquisitor was nowhere to be seen as they struggled through the snow toward Hagrid, who stood waiting for them on the edge of the forest. He did not present a reassuring sight. The bruises that had been purple on Saturday night were now tinged with green and yellow, and some of his cuts still seemed to be bleeding. Harry could not understand this. Had Hagrid perhaps been attacked by some creature whose venom prevented the wounds it inflicted from healing? As though to complete the ominous picture, Hagrid was carrying what looked like half a dead cow over his shoulder.
"We're working in here today,"
Hagrid called happily to the approaching students, jerking his head back at the dark trees behind him.
"Bit more sheltered. Anyway, they prefer the dark."
"Well, what prefers the dark?" Harry heard Malfoy say sharply to Crabbe and Goyle, a trace of panic in his voice. "Well, what did he say prefers the dark? Did you hear?" Harry remembered the only occasion on which Malfoy had entered this forest before now. He had not been very brave then, either. He smiled to himself. After the Quidditch match, anything that caused Malfoy discomfort was all right with him.
"Ready?"
said Hagrid happily, looking around at the class.
"Right, well, I've been saving a trip into the forest for your 5th year. Thought we'd go and see these creatures in their natural habitat. Now, what we're studying today is pretty rare. I reckon I'm probably the only person in Britain who's managed to train them."
And you're sure they're trained, are you?" said Malfoy, the panic in his voice even more pronounced now. "Only it wouldn't be the first time you brought wild stuff to class, would it?" The Slytherins murmured agreement, and a few Gryffindors looked as though they thought Malfoy had a fair point too.
"Course they're trained,"
said Hagrid, scowling and hoisting the dead cow a little higher on his shoulder. "So what happened to your face, then?" demanded Malfoy.
"Mind your own business," said Hagrid angrily. "Now, if you've finished asking stupid questions, follow me."
He turned and strode straight into the forest. Nobody seemed much disposed to follow. Harry glanced at Ron and Hermione, who sighed but nodded, and the three of them set off after Hagrid, leading the rest of the class. They walked for about 10 minutes, until they reached a place where the trees stood so closely together that it was as dark as twilight, and there was no snow on the ground at all. Hagrid deposited his half of a cow with a grunt on the ground, stepped back, and turned to face his class again, most of whom were creeping toward him from tree to tree, peering around nervously as though expecting to be set upon at any moment.
Gather round, said Hagrid encouragingly. "Now, they'll be attracted by the smell of the meat, but I'm going to give them a call anyway, 'cause they'll like to know it's me."
He turned, shook his shaggy head to get the hair out of his face, and gave an odd shrieking cry that echoed through the dark trees like the call of some monstrous bird. Nobody laughed. Most of them looked too scared to make a sound. Hagrid gave the shrieking cry again. A minute passed in which the class continued to peer nervously over their shoulders and around trees for a first glimpse of whatever it was that was coming. And then, as Hagrid shook his black hair for the third time and expanded his enormous chest, Harry nudged Ron and pointed into the black space between two gnarled yew trees. A pair of blank, white, shining eyes were growing larger through the gloom, and a moment later the dragonish face, neck, and then skeletal body of a great black winged horse emerged from the darkness. It looked around at the class for a few seconds, swishing its long black tail, then bowed its head and began to tear flesh from the dead cow with its pointed fangs. A great wave of relief broke over Harry. Here at last was proof that he had not imagined these creatures, that they were real. Hagrid knew about them too. He looked eagerly at Ron, but Ron was still staring around into the trees, and after a few seconds he whispered, "Why doesn't Hagrid call again?" Most of the rest of the class were wearing expressions as confused and nervously expectant as Ron's, and were still gazing everywhere but at the horse standing feet in front of them. There was only two other people who seemed to be able to see them. A stringy Slytherin boy standing just behind Goyle, who was watching the horse eating with an expression of great distaste on his face, and Neville, whose eyes were following the swishing progress of the long black tail.
"Oh, and here comes another one,"
said Hagrid proudly as a second black horse appeared out of the dark trees, folded its leathery wings closer to its body, and dipped its head to gorge on the meat.
Now, put your hands up. Who can see 'em?
Immensely pleased to feel that he was at last going to understand the mystery of these horses, Harry raised his hand. Hagrid nodded at him.
Yeah, I knew you'd be able to, Harry, he said seriously. And you too, Neville, eh? And...
Excuse me, said Malfoy in a sneering voice, but what exactly are we supposed to be seeing? For answer, Hagrid pointed at the cow carcass on the ground. The whole class stared at it for a few seconds, then several people gasped, and Parvati squealed. Harry understood why. Bits of flesh stripping themselves away from the bones and vanishing into thin air had to look very odd indeed. What's doing it? Parvati demanded in a terrified voice, retreating behind the nearest tree. What's eating it?
Thestrals, said Hagrid proudly, and Hermione gave a soft "oh" of comprehension at Harry's shoulder. Hogwarts has got a whole herd of them in here. Now, who knows?
But they're really, really unlucky, interrupted Parvati, looking alarmed. They're supposed to bring all sorts of horrible misfortune on people who see them. Professor Trelawney told me once.
No, said Hagrid, chuckling. That's just superstition, that is. They aren't unlucky, they're dead clever and useful. Of course, this lot don't get a lot of work. It's just mainly pulling the school carriages unless Dumbledore's taking a long journey and don't want to operate. And here's another couple. Look.
2 more horses came quietly out of the trees, one of them passing very close to Parvati, who shivered and pressed herself closer to the tree, saying, I think I found something. I think it's near me.
Don't worry, it won't hurt you, said Hagrid patiently. Right, now, who can tell me why some of you can see 'em and some can't?
Hermione raised her hand.
Go on, then,
said Hagrid, beaming at her. The only people who can see Thestrals, she said, are people who have seen death.
That's exactly right, said Hagrid solemnly. 10 points to Gryffindor. Now, Thestrals...
Ahem. Professor Umbridge had arrived. She was standing a few feet away from Harry, wearing her green hat and cloak again, her clipboard at the ready. Hagrid, who had never heard Umbridge's fake cough before, was gazing in some concern at the closest Thestral, evidently under the impression that it had made the sound.
Ahem. Oh, hello,
said Hagrid, smiling, having located the source of the noise. You received the note I sent to your cabin this morning? Said Umbridge in the same loud, slow voice she had used with him earlier, as though she was addressing somebody both foreign and very slow. Telling you that I would be inspecting your lesson?
Oh, yeah, said Hagrid brightly. Glad you found the place, all right. Well, as you can see, or I don't know, can you? We're doing Thestrals today.
I'm sorry, said Umbridge loudly, cupping her hand around her ear and frowning. What did you say? Hagrid looked a little confused.
Thestrals, he said loudly. Big, winged horses, you know.
He flapped his gigantic arms hopefully. Professor Umbridge raised her eyebrows at him and muttered as she made a note on her clipboard. Has to resort to crude sign language.
Well, anyway, said Hagrid, turning back to the class and looking slightly flustered. What was I saying?
Appears to have poor short-term memory, muttered Umbridge loudly enough for everyone to hear. Draco Malfoy looked as though Christmas had come a month early. Hermione, on the other hand, had turned scarlet with suppressed rage.
Oh, yeah,
said Hagrid, throwing an uneasy glance at Umbridge's clipboard, but plowing on valiantly.
Yeah, I was going to tell you how we got a herd. Yeah, so we started off with a male and 5 females. This one. He patted the first horse to have appeared. Name a Tenebris. He's my special favorite. First one born here in the forest.
Are you aware, Umbridge said loudly, interrupting him, that the Ministry of Magic has classified Thestrals as dangerous?
Harry's heart sank like a stone, but Hagrid merely chuckled. Thestrals aren't dangerous. All right, they might take a bite out of you if you really annoy them, but...
Shows signs of pleasure at the idea of violence, muttered Umbridge, scribbling on her clipboard again.
No, come on, said Hagrid, looking a little anxious now. I mean, a dog will bite you if you bait it, won't it? But Thestrals have just got a bad reputation because of the death thing. People used to think they were bad omens, didn't they? Just didn't understand, did they?
Umbridge did not answer. She finished writing her last note, then looked up at Hagrid and said again very loudly and slowly, Please continue teaching as usual. I am going to walk... She mimed walking. Malfoy and Pansy Parkinson were having silent fits of laughter. Among the students, she pointed around at individual members of the class, and ask them questions. She pointed at her mouth to indicate talking. Hagrid stared at her, clearly at a complete loss to understand why she was acting as though he did not understand normal English. Hermione had tears of fury in her eyes now. "You hag! You evil hag!" she whispered as Umbridge walked toward Pansy Parkinson. "I know what you're doing, you awful, twisted fishes."
Anyway, said Hagrid, clearly struggling to regain the flow of his lesson. "So, Thestrals, yeah, well, there's loads of good stuff about them."
"Do you find," said Professor Umbridge in a ringing voice to Pansy Parkinson, "that you are able to understand Professor Hagrid when he talks?" Just like Hermione, Pansy had tears in her eyes, but these were tears of laughter. Indeed, her giggles, the answer was almost incoherent because she was trying to suppress her giggles. "No, because, well, it sounds like grunting a lot of the time." Umbridge scribbled on her clipboard. The few unbruised bits of Hagrid's face flushed, but he tried to act as though he had not heard Pansy's answer.
Yeah. Good stuff about Thestrals. Well, once they're tamed like this lot, you'll never be lost again. Mazin senses a direction. Just tell him where you want to go."
"Assuming they can understand you, of course," said Malfoy loudly, and Pansy Parkinson collapsed in a fit of renewed giggles. Professor Umbridge smiled indulgently at them, and then turned to Neville. "You can see Thestrals Longbottom, can't you?" she said. Neville nodded. "Whom did you see die?" she asked, her tone indifferent. My granddad," said Neville. "And what do you think of them?" she said, waving her stubby hands at the horses, who by now had stripped a great deal of the carcass down to the bone. Said Neville nervously with a glance at Hagrid. "Well, they're, okay. Students are too intimidated to admit they are frightened," muttered Umbridge, making another note on her clipboard. "No," said Neville, looking upset. "No, I'm not scared of them." "It's quite all right," said Umbridge, patting Neville on the shoulder with what she evidently intended to be an understanding smile, though it looked more like a leer to Harry. "Well, Hagrid," she turned to look up at him again, speaking once more in that loud, slow voice, "I think I've got enough to be getting along with. You will receive," she mimed, taking something from the air in front of her, "the results of your inspection," she pointed at the clipboard, "in 10 days' time." She held up 10 stubby little fingers. Then, her smile wider and more toad-like than ever before beneath her green hat, she bustled from their midst, leaving Malfoy and Pansy Parkinson in fits of laughter, Hermione actually shaking with fury, and Neville looking confused and upset. "That foul, lying, twisting old gargoyle!" stormed Hermione half an hour later as they made their way back up to the castle, through the channels they had made earlier in the snow. "You see what she's up to? It's her thing about half-breeds all over again. She's just trying to make out Hagrid's some kind of dim-witted troll, just because he had a giantess for a mother. Oh, it's not fair! That really wasn't a bad lesson at all. I mean, all right, if it had been Blast-Ended Scroots again, but Thestrals are fine. In fact, for Hagrid, they're really good." "Umbridge said they're dangerous," said Ron. "Well, it's like Hagrid said, they can look after themselves," said Hermione impatiently. "And I suppose a teacher like Grubbly Plank wouldn't usually show them to us before Newt level, but, well, they are very interesting, aren't they? The way some people can see them and some can't. Oh, I wish I could." "Do you?" Harry asked her quietly. She looked horror-struck. "Oh, Harry! No, I'm sorry. No, of course I don't. That was a really stupid thing to say." "It's okay," he said quickly. "Don't worry." "I'm surprised so many people could see them," said Ron. 3 in a class." "Yeah, Weasley, we were just wondering," said a malicious voice nearby. Unheard by any of them in the muffling snow, Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle were walking along right behind them. "Do you reckon if you saw someone snuff it, you'd be able to see the quaffle better?" He, Crabbe, and Goyle roared with laughter as they pushed past on their way to the castle, and then broke into a chorus of "Weasley is our king." Ron's ears turned scarlet. "Ignore them, just ignore them," intoned Hermione, pulling out her wand and performing the charm to produce hot air again, so that she could melt them an easier path through the untouched snow between them and the greenhouses. December arrived, bringing with it more snow and a positive avalanche of homework for the 5th years. Ron and Hermione's prefect duties also became more and more onerous. As Christmas approached, they were called upon to supervise the decoration of the castle. "You try putting up tinsel when Peeves has got the other end and is trying to strangle you with it," said Ron, to watch over 1st and 2nd years spending their break times inside because of the bitter cold. "And they're cheeky little snot rags, you know. We definitely weren't that rude when we were in 1st year," said Ron. and to patrol the corridors in shifts with Argus Filch, who suspected that the holiday spirits might show itself in an outbreak of wizard duels. "He's got dung for brains, that one," said Ron furiously. They were so busy that Hermione had stopped knitting elf hats and was fretting that she was down to her last 3. "All those poor elves I haven't set free yet, having to stay over during the Christmas because there aren't enough hats." Harry, who had not had the heart to tell her that Dobby was taking everything she made, bent lower over his History of Magic essay. In any case, he did not want to think about Christmas. For the first time in his school career, he very much wanted to spend the holidays away from Hogwarts. Between his Quidditch ban and worry about whether or not Hagrid was going to be put on probation, he felt highly resentful toward the place at the moment. The only thing he really looked forward to were the DA meetings. And they would have to stop over the holidays, as nearly everybody in the DA would be spending the time with their families. Hermione was going skiing with her parents, something that greatly amused Ron, who had never before heard of muggles strapping narrow strips of wood to their feet to slide down mountains. Ron, meanwhile, was going home to the burrow. Harry endured several days of jealousy before Ron said, in response to Harry asking how Ron was going to get home for Christmas, "But you're coming too." "Well, didn't I say? Mom wrote and told me to invite you weeks ago." Hermione rolled her eyes, but Harry's spirits soared. The thought of Christmas at the Burrow was truly wonderful, only slightly marred by Harry's guilty feeling that he would not be able to spend the holiday with Sirius. He wondered whether he could possibly persuade Mrs. Weasley to invite his godfather for the festivities too, but apart from the fact that he doubted whether Dumbledore would permit Sirius to leave Grimmauld Place, he could not help but feel that Mrs. Weasley might not want him. They were so often at loggerheads. Sirius had not contacted Harry at all since his last appearance in the fire, and although Harry knew that with Umbridge on the constant watch it would be unwise to attempt to contact him, he did not like to think of Sirius alone in his mother's old house, perhaps pulling a lonely cracker with Kreacher. Harry arrived early in the Room of Requirement for the last DA meeting before the holidays, and was very glad he had, because when the lamps burst into light, he saw that Dobby had taken it upon himself to decorate the place for Christmas. He could tell the elf had done it because nobody else would have strung 100 golden baubles from the ceiling, each showing a picture of Harry's face and bearing the legend, "Have a very Harry Christmas." Harry had only just managed to get the last of them down before the door creaked open and Luna Lovegood entered, looking dreamy as always. "Hello," she said vaguely, looking around at what remained of the decorations. "These are nice. Did you put them up?" "No," said Harry. "It was Dobby the house elf." "Mistletoe," said Luna dreamily, pointing at a large clump of white berries placed almost over Harry's head. He jumped out from underneath it. "Good thinking," said Luna very seriously. "It's often infested with nargles." Harry was saved the necessity of asking what nargles were by the arrival of Angelina, Katie, and Alicia. All 3 of them were breathless and looked very cold. "Well," said Angelina dully, pulling off her cloak and throwing it into a corner, "we've replaced you." "Replaced me?" said Harry blankly. "You and Fred and George," she said impatiently. "We've got another seeker." "Who?" said Harry quickly. "Ginny Weasley," said Katie. Harry gaped at her. "Yeah, I know," said Angelina, pulling out her wand and flexing her arm. "But she's pretty good, actually." "Nothing on you, of course," she said, throwing him a very dirty look. "But as we can't have you—" Harry bit back the retort he was longing to utter. Did she imagine for a second that he did not regret his expulsion from the team 100 times more than she did? "And what about the beaters?" he asked, trying to keep his voice even. "Andrew Kirk," said Alicia without enthusiasm, "and Jack Sloper. Neither of them are brilliant, but compared with the rest of the idiots who turned up." The arrival of Ron, Hermione, and Neville brought this depressing discussion to an end, and within 5 minutes the room was full enough to prevent him seeing Angelina's burning, reproachful looks. "Okay," he said, calling them all to order. "I thought this evening we should just go over the things we've done so far, because it's the last meeting before the holidays, and there's no point in starting anything new right before a 3-week break." "We're not doing anything new," said Zacharias Smith in a disgruntled whisper loud enough to carry across the room. "If I'd known that, I wouldn't have come." "We're really sorry Harry didn't tell you then," said Fred loudly. Several people sniggered. Harry saw Cho laughing and felt the familiar swooping sensation in his stomach, as though he had missed a step going downstairs. We can practice in pairs," said Harry. "We'll start with the impediment jinx just for 10 minutes, then we can get out the cushions and try stunning again." They all divided up obediently. Harry parted Neville as usual, and the room was soon full of intermittent cries of "Impedimenta!" People froze for a minute or so, during which their partners would stare aimlessly around the room watching other pairs at work, then would unfreeze and take their turn at the jinx. Neville had improved beyond all recognition. After a while, when Harry had unfrozen 3 times in a row, he had Neville join Ron and Hermione again so that he could walk around the room and watch the others. When he passed Cho, she beamed at him. He resisted the temptation to walk past her several more times. After 10 minutes on the impediment jinx, they laid out the cushions all over the floor and started practicing stunning again. Space was really too confined to allow them all to work this spell at once. Half the group observed the others for a while, then swapped over. Harry felt himself positively swelling with pride as he watched them all. True, Neville did stun Padma Patil rather than Dean, at whom he had been aiming, but it was a much closer miss than usual, and everybody else had made enormous progress. At the end of an hour, Harry called a halt. "You're getting really good," he said, beaming around at them. "When we get back from the holidays, we can start doing some of the big stuff, maybe even Patronuses." There was a murmur of excitement. The room began to clear in the usual 2s and 3s. Most people wished Harry a happy Christmas as they went. Feeling cheerful, he collected up the cushions with Ron and Hermione and stacked them neatly away. Ron and Hermione left before he did. He hung back a little because Cho was still there and he was hoping to receive a Merry Christmas from her. "No, you go on," he heard her say to her friend Marietta, and his heart gave a jolt that seemed to take it into the region of his Adam's apple. He pretended to be straightening the cushion pile. He was quite sure they were alone now and waited for her to speak. Instead, he heard a hearty sniff. He turned and saw Cho standing in the middle of the room, tears pouring down her face. What? He didn't know what to do. She was simply standing there, crying silently. "What's up?" he said feebly. She shook her head and wiped her eyes on her sleeve. I'm sorry," she said thickly. "I suppose it just... learning all this stuff, it just makes me wonder whether... if he'd known it at all, he'd still be alive." Harry's heart sank right back past its usual spot and settled somewhere around his navel. He ought to have known. She wanted to talk about Cedric. "He did know this stuff," Harry said heavily. "He was really good at it, or he could never have gotten to the middle of that maze. But if Voldemort really wants to kill you, you don't stand a chance." She hiccuped at the sound of Voldemort's name, but stared at Harry without flinching. "You survived when you were just a baby," she said quietly. "Yeah, well," said Harry wearily, moving toward the door. "I don't know why. Nor does anyone else, so it's nothing to be proud of." "Oh, don't go," said Cho, sounding tearful again. "I'm really sorry to get all upset like this. I didn't mean to." She hiccuped again. She was very pretty, even when her eyes were red and puffy. Harry felt thoroughly miserable. He'd have been so pleased with just a Merry Christmas. "I know it must be horrible for you," she said, mopping her eyes on her sleeve again. "Me mentioning Cedric when you saw him die. I suppose you just want to forget about it." Harry did not say anything to this. It was quite true, but he felt heartless saying it. "You're a really good teacher, you know," said Cho with a watery smile. "I've never been able to stun anything before." "Thanks," said Harry awkwardly. They looked at each other for a long moment. Harry felt a burning desire to run from the room, and at the same time, a complete inability to move his feet. "Mistletoe," said Cho quietly, pointing at the ceiling over his head. "Yeah," said Harry. His mouth was very dry. "It's probably full of nargles, though." "What are nargles?" "No idea," said Harry. She had moved closer. His brain seemed to have been stunned. "You'd have to ask Looney. Luna, I mean." Cho made a funny noise halfway between a sob and a laugh. She was even nearer him now. He could have counted the freckles on her nose. "I really like you, Harry." He could not think. A tingling sensation was spreading throughout him, paralyzing his arms, legs, and brain. She was much too close. He could see every tear clinging to her eyelashes. He returned to the common room half an hour later to find Hermione and Ron in the best seats by the fire. Nearly everybody else had gone to bed. Hermione was writing a very long letter. She had already filled half a roll of parchment which was dangling from the edge of the table. Ron was lying on the hearthrug, trying to finish his transfiguration homework. "What kept you?" he asked as Harry sank into the armchair next to Hermione's. Harry did not answer. He was in a state of shock. Half of him wanted to tell Ron and Hermione what had just happened, but the other half wanted to take the secret with him to the grave. "Are you all right, Harry?" Hermione asked, peering at him over the tip of her quill. Harry gave a half-hearted shrug. In truth, he didn't know whether he was all right or not. "What's up?" said Ron, hoisting himself up on his elbow to get a clearer view of Harry. "What's happened?" Harry didn't quite know how to set about telling them and still wasn't sure whether he wanted to. Just as he had decided not to say anything, Hermione took matters out of his hands. "Is it Cho?" she asked in a businesslike way. "Did she corner you after the meeting?" Numbly surprised, Harry nodded. Ron sniggered, breaking off when Hermione caught his eye. "So, what does she want?" he said in a mock casual voice. Harry began rather hoarsely. He cleared his throat and tried again. Did you kiss?" said Hermione briskly. Ron sat up so fast that he sent his ink bottle flying all over the rug. Disregarding this completely, he stared avidly at Harry. "Well?" he demanded. Harry looked from Ron's expression of mingled curiosity and hilarity to Hermione's slight frown and nodded. "Ha!" Ron made a triumphant gesture with his fist and went into a raucous peal of laughter that made several timid-looking second years over beside the window jump. A reluctant grin spread over Harry's face as he watched Ron rolling around on the hearthrug. Hermione gave Ron a look of deep disgust and returned to her letter. "Well?" Ron said finally, looking up at Harry. "How was it?" Harry considered for a moment. "Wet," he said truthfully. Ron made a noise that might have indicated jubilation or disgust. It was hard to tell. "Because she was crying," Harry continued heavily. "Oh," said Ron, his smile fading slightly. "Are you that bad at kissing?" "Dunno," said Harry, who hadn't considered this and immediately felt rather worried. "Maybe I am." "Of course you're not," said Hermione absently, still scribbling away at her letter. "How do you know?" said Ron in a sharp voice. "Because Cho spends half her time crying these days," said Hermione vaguely. "She does it at meal times, in the loos, all over the place." "You'd think a bit of kissing would cheer her up," said Ron, grinning. "Ron," said Hermione in a dignified voice, dipping the point of her quill into her inkpot, "you are the most insensitive wart I have ever had the misfortune to meet." "What's that supposed to mean?" said Ron indignantly. "What sort of person cries while someone's kissing them?" "Yeah," said Harry slightly desperately. "Who does?" Hermione looked at the pair of them with an almost pitying expression on her face. "Don't you understand how Cho's feeling at the moment?" she asked. "No," said Harry and Ron together. Hermione sighed and laid down her quill. "Well, obviously she's feeling very sad because of Cedric dying. Then I expect she's feeling confused because she likes Cedric, and now she likes Harry, and she can't work out who she likes best. Then she'll be feeling guilty thinking it's an insult to Cedric's memory to be kissing Harry at all, and she'll be worrying about what everyone else might say about her if she starts going out with Harry. And she probably can't work out what her feelings toward Harry are anyway, because he was the one who was with Cedric when Cedric died. So that's all very mixed up and painful. Oh, and she's afraid she's going to be thrown off the Ravenclaw Quidditch team because she's been flying so badly." A slightly stunned silence greeted the end of this speech. Then Ron said, "One person can't feel all that at once. They'd explode." "Just because you've got the emotional range of a teaspoon doesn't mean we all have," said Hermione nastily, picking up her quill again. "She was the one who started it," said Harry. "I wouldn't have... She just sort of came at me, and next thing she's crying all over me. I didn't know what to do." "Don't blame you, mate," said Ron, looking alarmed at the very thought. "Oh, you just had to be nice to her," said Hermione, looking up anxiously. "You were, weren't you?" "Well," said Harry, an unpleasant heat creeping up his face, "I sort of patted her on the back a bit." Hermione looked as though she was restraining herself from rolling her eyes with extreme difficulty. "Well, I suppose it could have been worse," she said. "Are you going to see her again?" "Well, I'll have to, won't I?" said Harry. "We've got DA meetings, haven't we?" "You know what I mean," said Hermione impatiently. Harry said nothing. Hermione's words opened up a whole new vista of frightening possibilities. He tried to imagine going somewhere with Cho. Hogsmeade, perhaps, and being alone with her for hours at a time. Of course, she would have been expecting to ask her out after what just happened. The thought made his stomach clench painfully. "Oh, well," said Hermione distantly, buried in her letter once more. "You'll have plenty of opportunities to ask her." "Well, what if he doesn't want to ask her?" said Ron, who had been watching Harry with an unusually shrewd expression on his face. "Don't be silly," said Hermione vaguely. "Harry's liked you for ages, haven't you, Harry?" He did not answer. Yes, he had liked Cho for ages, but whenever he had imagined a scene involving the two of them, it had always featured a Cho who was enjoying herself, as opposed to a Cho who was sobbing uncontrollably into his shoulder. "Who are you writing the novel to, anyway?" Ron asked Hermione, trying to read the bit of parchment now trailing on the floor. Hermione hitched it up out of sight. "Victor." "Krum?" "How many other Victors do we know?" Ron said nothing, but looked disgruntled. They sat in silence for another 20 minutes, Ron finishing his transfiguration essay with many snorts of impatience and crossing out. Hermione writing steadily to the very end of the parchment, rolling it up carefully and sealing it. And Harry staring into the fire, wishing more than anything that Sirius's head would appear there and give him some advice about girls. But the fire merely crackled lower and lower until the red-hot embers crumbled into ash, and looking around, Harry saw that they were, yet again, the last in the common room. "Well, night," said Hermione, yawning widely, and she set off up the girls' staircase. "What does she see in Krum?" Ron demanded as he and Harry climbed the boys' stairs. "Well," said Harry, considering the matter, "I suppose he's older, isn't he? And he's an international Quidditch player?" Yeah, but apart from that," said Ron, sounding aggravated. "I mean, he's a grouchy git, isn't he?" "A bit grouchy, yeah," said Harry, whose thoughts were still on Cho. They pulled off their robes and put on pajamas in silence. Dean, Seamus, and Neville were already asleep. Harry put his glasses on his bedside table and got into bed, but did not pull the hangings closed around his four-poster. Instead, he stared at the patch of starry sky visible through the window next to Neville's bed. If he had known this time last night that in 24 hours' time he would have kissed Cho Chang. "Night," grunted Ron from somewhere to his right. "Night," said Harry. Maybe next time, if there was a next time, she'd be a bit happier. He ought to have asked her out. She had probably been expecting it and was now really angry with him. Or was she lying in bed still crying about Cedric? He did not know what to think. Hermione's explanation had made it all seem more complicated rather than easier to understand. That's what they should teach us here, he thought, turning over onto his side. How girls' brains work. It'd be more useful than divination anyway. Neville snuffled in his sleep. An owl hooted somewhere out in the night. Harry dreamed he was back in the DA room. Cho was accusing him of luring her there under false pretenses. She said he had promised her 150 chocolate frog cards if she showed up. Harry protested. Cho shouted, "Cedric gave me loads of chocolate frog cards, look!" And she pulled out fistfuls of cards from inside her robes and threw them into the air, and then turned into Hermione, who said, "You did promise her, you know, Harry. I think you'd better give her something else instead. How about your firebolt?" And Harry was protesting that he could not give Cho his firebolt because Umbridge had it. And anyway, the whole thing was ridiculous. He'd only come to the DA room to put up some Christmas baubles shaped like Dobby's head. The dream changed. His body felt smooth, powerful, and flexible. He was gliding between shining metal bars across dark, cold stone. He was flat against the floor, sliding along his belly. It was dark, yet he could see objects around him shimmering in strange, vibrant colors. He was turning his head. At first glance, the corridor was empty. But no, a man was sitting on the floor ahead, his chin dropping onto his chest, his outline gleaming in the dark. Harry put out his tongue. He tasted the man's scent on the air. He was alive, but drowsing, sitting in front of the door at the end of the corridor. Harry longed to bite the man, but he must master the impulse. He had more important work to do. But the man was stirring. A silvery cloak fell from his legs as he jumped to his feet, and Harry saw his vibrant, blurred outline towering above him. I saw a wand withdrawn from a belt. He had no choice. He reared from the floor and struck once, twice, 3 times, plunging his fangs deeply into the man's flesh, feeling his ribs splinter beneath his jaws, feeling the warm gush of blood. The man was yelling in pain. Then he fell silent. He slumped backward against the wall. Blood was splattered onto the floor. His forehead hurt terribly. It was aching, fit to burst. "Harry! Harry!" He opened his eyes. Every inch of his body was covered in icy sweat. His bed covers were twisted all around him like a straitjacket. He felt as though a white-hot poker was being applied to his forehead. "Harry!" Ron was standing over him, looking extremely frightened. There were more figures at the foot of Harry's bed. He clutched his head in his hands. The pain was blinding him. He rolled right over and vomited over the edge of the mattress. "He's really ill," said a scared voice. "Should we call someone?" "Harry! Harry!" He had to tell Ron. It was very important that he tell him. Taking great gulps of air, Harry pushed himself up in bed, willing himself not to throw up again, the pain half blinding him. "Your dad," he panted, his chest heaving. "Your dad's been attacked." "What?" said Ron uncomprehendingly. "Your dad, he's been bitten. It's serious. There was blood everywhere." "I'm going for help," said the same scared voice, and Harry heard footsteps running out of the dormitory. "Harry, mate," said Ron uncertainly. You were just dreaming." "No!" said Harry furiously. It was crucial that Ron understand. It wasn't a dream. Not an ordinary dream. I was there. I saw it. I did it. He could hear Seamus and Dean muttering, but did not care. The pain in his forehead was subsiding slightly, though he was still sweating and shivering feverishly. He retched again, and Ron leapt backward out of the way. "Harry, you're not well," he said shakily. "Neville's gone for help." "I'm fine," Harry choked, wiping his mouth on his pajamas and shaking uncontrollably. "There's nothing wrong with me. It's your dad you've got to worry about. We need to find out where he is. He's bleeding like mad. It was a huge snake." He tried to get out of bed, but Ron pushed him back into it. Dean and Seamus were still whispering somewhere nearby. Whether 1 minute passed or 10, Harry did not know. He simply sat there shaking, feeling the pain recede very slowly from his scar. Then there were hurried footsteps coming up the stairs, and he heard Neville's voice again. "Over here, Professor." Professor McGonagall came hurrying into the dormitory in her tartan dressing gown, her glasses perched lopsidedly on the bridge of her bony nose. "What is it, Potter? Where does it hurt?" He had never been so pleased to see her. It was a member of the Order of the Phoenix he needed now, not someone fussing over him and prescribing useless potions. "It's Ron's dad," he said, sitting up again. "He's been attacked by a snake, and it's serious. I saw it happen." "What do you mean you saw it happen?" said Professor McGonagall, her dark eyebrows contracting. "I don't know. I was asleep, and then I was there." "You mean you dreamed this?" "No," said Harry angrily. "Would none of them understand? I was having a dream at first about something completely different, something stupid, and then this interrupted it. It was real. I didn't imagine it. Mr. Weasley was asleep on the floor, and he was attacked by a gigantic snake. There was a load of blood. He collapsed. Someone's got to find out where he is." Professor McGonagall was gazing at him through her lopsided spectacles, as though horrified at what she was seeing. "I'm not lying, and I'm not mad," Harry told her, his voice rising to a shout. "I tell you, I saw it happen!" "I believe you, Potter," said Professor McGonagall curtly. "Put on your dressing gown. We're going to see the headmaster."